Match found.
Stand in my way. I dare you.
Hello guys.
Hello.
Reina or Tahu?
What are you saying, bro?
I would say you can take a duelist. Duelist.
I have a question, bro.
Yeah.
Aslo,
What's the mission? Kill contract? Sorry, I forgot to read the brief.
Aslo?
Ja. Was liegt dir auf dem Herzen?
No, guys.
Enemy spotted A.
Reloading.
Close,
There.
smoke.
Right
Enemy
there.
spotted A. Drop and reloading.
Trevor!
Spike planted. One enemy remaining.
Here. You are in our way.
Chill, guys.
Keep them off balance. Spike's here.
Saving.
I'm saving.
Sage, where are you from?
What?
I'm ready.
Where are you from?
I'm from Finland.
Ah,
No chance.
Cutting their vision.
Concussing! Right there. Neutralized.
Spike planted. Wall raised.
nice work.
Enemy spotted A.
Right there. Flash out!
There's someone coming from.
Spotted A.
Full treff!
Enemy spotted A.
One enemy remaining.
Enemy spotted A.
Flawless.
Let them rot.
The symphony of death. Don't worry, you get used to it. Buying.
What do you want, guys, though?
No prisoners.
Let's go B.
Enemy spotted B.
Blinding!
Sight.
Drop in a smoke. Plant the spike.
Cutting their vision.
Trevor!
Plant the spike.
Show me a target. Destabilize. Kim Yong.
Enemy spotted.
Planted.
See. There. One enemy remaining.
Enemy spotted. C. Reloading.
He's in spawn. Okay. No need to push.
Blasting!
Reloading.
Team Ace.
Nice.
Amazing.
Good job, team.
I am honored.
Gun here.
If you've never seen a massacre, this is what it looks like.
On my mark.
No stopping now.
Smoke on heaven.
Still
Low,
inside.
always smoke on heaven.
My
Oh, on
ult
top,
is
on
ready.
right there.
Refreshing.
Low, smoke on heaven.
Healing you.
Focusing.
Dropping smokes.
Someone.
Concussing!
Reloading.
Last
Spike
player
down.
standing. Last
I
player
never
standing.
left.
Spike down A. Look your enemy in the eye. It helps with accuracy.
$105 on chamber.
Enemy spotted A.
Brim, what you doing?
You fought well. Our spike carrier's done.
Spike down A. Last player standing.
Flash out!
They're just batteries. And I need a recharge. Embarrass them. They will cower!
Dropping smokes.
Trevor!
What is it, jogging?
Distraction.
Reloading.
Blinding!
Our spike's down.
Spike down A. Last player standing. Cypher buried.
One enemy remaining.
Oh, my bad.
Nice try.
Time to take these arms for a spin. Right there.
Let's go B2C. And low, please smoke here.
Over there.
Break them.
No, I don't want to smoke, bro.
Yeah, do it.
No peeking.
Message sent. My ultimate is ready.
Wall raised.
Nice wall.
Nowhere to run! Spike planted!
Cutting them.
Concussing!
See.
One enemy remaining. Last player standing.
Just play time.
No peeking. Have one of these.
Good job.
No charges. I'm nothing like the enemy clove. I wouldn't be caught dead in that outfit.
Yeah, I
Can
guess I
someone
need
get
to
this?
save.
Forward.
Cutting their vision.
Enemy spotted C.
Enemy spotted C.
Show me a target.
Rotate.
Reloading.
Let's rotate. Okay, let's go.
You want to play?
Oh, they
Let's
wanna
play.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Dropping a
Bro,
smoke.
bro,
Guys,
bro,
they know we are all there.
bro.
Last player standing. Spike down. C.
If we can't enter site
Forgive me,
quickly, then
Valorant
that's the fate. It's
What would happen?
Bro, where are you from?
me.
No, my dad. Yeah, you, bro.
Germany, why?
Bro, ich weiß ja, was ich mache, Bro. Natürlich wissen sie, dass wir dort sind.
Ja, ich meine ja auch nicht dich. Du wolltest ja mitkommen.
Ja, das ist ja nicht meine Schuld, wenn Wiz zu dumm ist für diese Scheiße.
I have your back.
Hat deine Fresse, du kleiner vierjähriger Kind, Alter.
Hey.
Enemy spotted A.
Pushing.
Hi! I'm pissed!
Rest. Gun here.
Still in sight.
Oh, fucking Chamber on box.
Du Klini-Schorm. Warum nimmst du meine scheiß Enden weg, Mann? Du kannst dich verspielen, Mann.
Reloading.
Enemy spotted A. Three down.
You had your fun.
Enemy spotted A.
My turn.
One enemy remaining.
Your tactics failed.
Every
My ult
fight
is
is a
ready.
lesson.
Need a drop.
Need a drop.
He didn't want it, bro. Go away, bro.
Thank you.
We win. We survive.
Het is niet fresse, du Hund. Kom wieder zu Mommy.
Still in sight.
Enemy spotted A.
Insecto.
Flash out!
Barrier created.
Careful here. Light planted.
One enemy remaining.
Reload.
Reloading.
There.
Enemy spotted A. You made a mess of yourself.
They don't have a single life worth saving.
He's gonna take it.
Okej, nu kör vi!
Enemy spotted A. Gun here.
Trevor!
There. My ult ready. They will cover! See nothing.
Blinding!
One enemy
Flash out.
remaining.
En
Sorry Reyna. Sorry Reyna for a flash.
Okay.
Last round before the switch.
Last call for all the things we need to kill him with. Buy up.
ISO by full shield. It's last round.
Buy or fanboy. Buy or fanboy. Good boy.
Concussing!
Und wie geht's dir so alle? So, wie geht's euch?
Ja, das Spiel bricht mich.
Cutting their vision.
Kenn ich. Das war meine erste Runde.
Opponent killed.
I know exactly where you are.
Last player standing.
Breach.
Kam
Switching
gar nicht.
sides.
Ist Breach ein Kollege?
I know. What
Nee.
must be done?
Breach your shit, bro. Please log in.
I am your mom, bro.
You stunned the hell out of
Do
me.
you have autism?
Sorry.
Don't.
Dieses Spiel macht mich so fertig.
Wie alt bist du eigentlich?
26. So war das, ey. Many steps here.
Finished. Many enemies A. Enemy down. Enemy spotted A.
Don't push ISO. Okay.
Spike down A.
Kennt ihr?
How is he from... He's one aside, one aside.
One enemy remaining.
Elbow.
Trevor!
Do we have Spike?
Also.
Yeah.
Where's Spike?
Spike is there.
Also.
Drop in a smoke.
Also.
Last player standing. 30 seconds left.
Just chill, bro. Just chill. DMP, DMP, DMP. DMP, DMP. Make it E.
Spike planted.
Good job.
Nice.
Change of plans. When we go out there, someone dies.
Saving.
Carry that weight. I'm saving.
Ey, Bro, Rank bist du eigentlich? Rank.
Ja, ich bin stuck in Bronze, Digga. Ich habe letztens 17 Games in Folge verloren, war dann wieder Iron 3, jetzt bin ich wieder auf dem Weg zu Bronze 2.
Ah, kenn ich. Ich war Anfang 8, Iron 3, hab 20 verloren, auf Iron 1 runtergekommen.
Eliminate.
Ja, komm.
I tried to flank. Yeah, one is camping in the garden. Holy fucking shit.
Concussing!
Enemy spotted C.
Spike planted. One enemy remaining.
Target down. No
One
peeking.
defuse.
Wall raised.
Last player standing.
Oh,
I'm just trying to do my job here.
ja, ich wurde Bronze 1 oder 2 eingerankt. Dann habe ich wirklich 17 Spiele verloren, war Iron 3. Dann hat es gefühlt 18 Spiele gedauert, bis ich wieder Bronze 1 bin jetzt. Digga, es ist so bodenlos.
Ich bin jetzt nach fast 20 Stunden wieder Iron 3 und jetzt bin ich, mach Schrot Bronze.
Ich gewinne ein Spiel, dann verliere ich ein Spiel. Ich gewinne ein Spiel, ich verliere ein Spiel. Und jedes Mal mit so Kackmates, die einfach hirnlos spielen.
Ja, schau mal, wir haben einen scheiß 4-jährigen Kind drin.
9-5 to us.
Halt deine Fresse, du Hund.
Nice. Can you speak English, please?
I said, shut
I
up, little kid.
I studied 1 year in Germany, but I don't
didn't ask.
remember it.
Spike
Shut the
planted.
fuck up. I'm not talking to you. I'm just a kid.
Last player standing.
Shut your mouth, Clove. I'm not talking to you. You're just a kid. Go grow up.
Shut up, please. You're a 3-9, bro. 3-9. Say something
Nice
when
try.
you're better, bro, but you're
Yeah.
3-9, bro.
They do sandwich from top and behind, for sure.
They think they're better than
Hat das
us.
von hinten
I can
genommen.
tell.
We don't need to push. When they come side, come back, and then we can collect our power.
Saving.
Sovadat A. It's just Sovadat until now. No steps here.
Disappear.
My
Enemy spotted mid. No distraction.
Landing.
Cutting their vision.
Yeah.
Last player standing.
Hey door.
Spike planted.
Worthless. Flash out.
One enemy remaining.
3 out.
Use your E.
Clearing out.
Motherfucker.
I didn't bring a snack. Did anyone bring a snack?
We win, we survive. They will cover!
You're finished.
Nice. ISO comeback. We got first frag.
Enemy spotted A.
Many steps here. Already on site. How is it fucking possible? Ah, I was alone on A. Okay, yeah.
Spike planted.
Multiple
Breaking
enemies
them.
A. Reloading.
Blinding!
Enemy down. You had your fun. My turn.
Last player standing.
They think they're so secure.
Saving. For you, hermanita.
See.
ARC.
It's over A.
Enemy spotted A.
Yeah, let's rotate.
Enemy spotted C.
Seems like all others are C.
Enemy spotted.
Spike down.
I know
C.
exactly where you are.
Die! Reloading.
Spike planted. One enemy remaining.
I was sweating.
My ult is ready. I reckon I'll take a kip after this. I've earned it.
Go in garage.
One on B, please. Breach, maybe.
No, I just think someone's gonna be me.
You want to play? Let's play.
Silver guard on A.
B.
Drop in a smoke. Many enemies.
Spike down B. Last player standing.
Back like I never left.
Last player standing.
Curious. Still in sight. Still in sight.
One enemy remaining. Spike down B.
That's body.
Sorry, guys.
If you must fall, then fall near me.
Listen, Sage, I think I'm gonna ult, so protect me.
Silver dot 8.
He might be B.
Steps here. Breach.
I'm going A.
Breach, why did you rotate?
Come.
No distraction.
Drop in a smoke.
It was silver dot A, Breach.
It was mid was empty.
September.
Spike planted.
Check under.
Amateur.
Last player standing.
Top.
One downside to being immortal. I can't play dead.
Don't over rotate, guys.
Everyone, you ult. Reina disrupt.
I will hold up the sky.
Steps here.
I think it's safe.
Tremor!
Many enemies say.
Focusing. Destabilizing.
No peeking.
Blinding!
Silver from B.
Hey.
For you.
Guys, I guess they're rotating. Sage, you have revive.
Right there.
Your duty is not over.
Back where I belong.
Nice, no weapon.
They are planting C.
Spike planted.
Yeah, I have no weapon, no flash.
Hey, pick with me. Now.
Sniper removed.
One enemy remaining.
Enemy spotted C. Reloading.
Good job, team.
My ult's ready. Not your day, is it?
Deep breaths, everyone. Your hearts are pounding.
As one.
I need you at B.
How many?
I think everyone. Might rotate.
C is empty.
Go see garage.
See, go planting.
That's a kill.
Spike planted.
Sova removed.
Enemy spotted.
Let's go!
Cutting their vision. You're done.
One enemy remaining.
Yes,
GG, guys.
let's go.
Flawless.
Keep that up, and we're gonna have a
Reloading.
good day. Reloading.
Match point.
A single battle between us and
We
victory.
got this,
I
guys. Come on.
I didn't stun you this time.
Ja. Nee.
Oh shite, I lost my pet rock.
Again. I killed Cypher.
Yeah, maybe Sage you can wall.
Concussing!
Spike down mid.
Flash out!
No need to push.
One enemy remaining.
You had your fun. My turn.
Playtime on the
Blinding!
Nowhere to run!
One enemy remaining.
Blasting!
Nice.
Nice, guys.
Defenders win.
Showed up. When 50 finally entered the living room of his grandparents' house the day of the meeting, he could feel the energy and excitement. The space was filled with over 20 young men, all ready to do his bidding. He began by painting for them his precise vision of the future. His music now was hot, but it was going to get a lot hotter. Within 2 more years, he was certain to land a major record deal. In his head, he already could hear the songs for his first record, visualize the cover and the overall concept. It was to be the story of his life. This record, he assured them, would be an astronomical success because he had figured out a kind of formula for how to make and market hit songs. He was not the usual rap star, he explained. He was not in this for the bling or the attention, but for the power. He would take the money from the record sales to establish his own businesses. This was destiny. Everything in his life was meant to happen as it did, including the assassination attempt, including this very meeting that afternoon. He was going to forge a business empire and he wanted to take all of them with him. Whatever any of them wanted, he would provide, as long as they proved themselves dependable and shared his sense of purpose. They could be rappers on the record label he would establish or road managers for his tours, or they could go to college and get a degree. He would pay for it all. You are like my pack of wolves, he explained, but none of this will happen if the alpha wolf is killed. What he asked for was their help, in providing security, in keeping him in touch with what was happening on the streets, and in doing some of the legwork for the promotion and distribution of his mixtapes. He needed followers and he had chosen them. Almost all of them agreed to the proposal, and over the years to come many of them stayed on to gain important positions within his expanding empire. And if they ever stopped to think about it, it was uncanny how close the future had come to resemble the picture he had painted so many years before. By 2007, after the tremendous success of his first 2 records, 50 began to sense a problem looming on the horizon. He had created an image for the public, a 50 myth that centered on his tough and menacing presence and his indestructibility. This was projected in his videos and interviews, and the photos of him with his glare and tattoos. Most of it was real, but it was all heightened for dramatic effect. This image had brought him a great deal of attention, but it was turning into an elaborate trap. To prove to his fans that he was still the same 50, he would have to keep upping the ante, engaging in more and more outrageous antics. He could not afford to seem like he was going soft, but it was not real to him anymore. He had moved on to a different life, and to stay rooted in this past image would prove to be the ultimate limit to his freedom. He would be trapped in the past and the prisoner of the very image he had created. It would all grow stale and his popularity would wane. In each phase of his life, he had found himself challenged by some seemingly insurmountable obstacle, surviving on the streets without parents to guide him, keeping away from the violence and time in prison, eluding the assassins on his heels, etc. If at any moment he had doubted himself or accepted the normal limits to his mobility, he would be dead or powerless, which was as good as dead in his mind. What had saved him in each case was the intensity of his ambition and self-belief. Now was not the time to get complacent or have doubts about the future. He would have to transform himself again. He would have his signature tattoos removed. Perhaps he would also change his name again. He would create a new image and myth to fit this period of his life, part business mogul, part power broker, slowly withdrawing from the public eye and flexing his muscles behind the scenes. This would surprise the public, keep him a step ahead of their expectations, and remove yet another barrier to his freedom. Reinventing himself in this way would be the ultimate reversal of the fate that seemed to await him after the death of his mother. The fearless approach. Your opinion of yourself becomes your reality. If you have all these doubts, then no one will believe in you and everything will go wrong. If you think the opposite will happen. It's that simple. 50 Cent. When you were born, you entered this world with no identity or ego. You were simply a bundle of chaotic impulses and desires. But slowly you acquired a personality that you have more or less built upon over the years. You are outgoing or shy, bold or skittish, a mix of various traits that defines you. You tend to accept this personality as something very real and established. But much of this identity is shaped and constructed by outside forces, the opinions and judgments of hundreds of other people who have crossed your path over the years. This process began with your parents. As a child, you paid extra close attention to what they said about you, modeling your behavior to win their approval and love. You closely monitored their body language to see what they liked and didn't like. Much of this had a tremendous impact on your evolution. If, for example, they commented about your shyness, it could easily strengthen any tendencies you had in that direction. You suddenly became aware of your own awkwardness and it stuck inside you. If they had said something different, trying to encourage you in your social skills and draw you out, it might have had a much different impact. Either way, shyness is a fluid quality. It fluctuates according to the situation and the people you are around. It should never be felt as a set personality trait. And yet these judgments from parents, friends, and teachers are given inordinate weight and become internalized. Many of these criticisms and opinions are not objective at all. People want to see certain qualities in you. They project onto you their own fears and fantasies. They want you to fit a conventional pattern. It is frustrating and often frightening for people to think they cannot figure someone out. Behavior that is considered abnormal or different, which may very well be coming from somewhere deep within you, is actively discouraged. Envy plays a role as well. If you are too good at something, you might be made to feel strange or undesirable. Even the praise of others is often designed to hem you in to certain ideals they want to see in you. All of this shapes your personality, limits your range of behavior, and becomes like a mask that hardens on your face. Understand, you are in fact a mystery to yourself.
Match found.
You began life as someone completely unique, a mix of qualities that will never be repeated in the history of the universe. In your earliest years, you were a mass of conflicting emotions and desires. Then something foreign to you is placed over this reality. Who you are is much more chaotic and fluid than this surface character.
Yo guys.
You are full of untapped potential and possibility. As a child, you had no real power to resist this process, but as an adult, you could easily rebel and rediscover your individuality. You could stop deriving your sense of identity and self-worth from others. You could experiment and push past the limits people have set for you. You could take action that is different from what they expect. But that is to incur a risk. You are being unconventional, perhaps a bit strange in the eyes of those who know you. You could fail in this action and be ridiculed. Conforming to people's expectations is safer and more comfortable, even if doing so makes you feel miserable and confined. In essence, you are afraid of yourself and what you could become. There is another, fearless way of approaching your life. It begins by untying yourself from the opinions of others. This is not as easy as it sounds. You are breaking a lifelong habit of continually referring to other people when measuring your value. You must experiment and feel the sensation of not concerning yourself with what others think or expect of you. You do not advance or retreat with their opinions in mind. You drown out their voices that often translate into doubts inside you. Instead of focusing on the limits you have internalized, you think of the potential you have for new and different behavior. Your personality can be altered and shaped by your conscious decision to do so. we barely understand the role that willpower plays in our actions. When you raise your opinion of yourself and what you are capable of, it has a decided influence on what you do. For instance, you feel more comfortable taking some risk, knowing that you are always able to get back up on your feet if it fails. Taking this risk will then make your energy levels rise. You have to meet the challenge or go under, and you will find untapped reservoirs of creativity within you. People are drawn to those who act boldly, and their attention and faith in you will have the effect of heightening your confidence. Feeling less confined by doubts, you give freer rein to your individuality, which makes everything you do more effective. This movement towards confidence has a self-fulfilling quality that is impossible to deny. Moving towards such self-belief does not mean you cut yourself off from others and their opinions of your actions. You must take constant measure of how people receive your work and use to maximum effect their feedback. See Chapter 7. But this process must begin from a position of inner strength. If you are dependent on their judgments for your sense of worth, then your ego will always be weak and fragile. You will have no center or sense of balance. You will wilt under criticisms and soar too high with any praise. Their opinions are merely helping you shape your work, not your self-image. If you make mistakes, if the public judges you negatively, you have an unshakable inner core that can accept such judgments, but you remain convinced of your own worth. In impoverished environments like the Hood, people's sense of who they are and what they deserve is continually under attack. People from the outside tend to judge them for where they come from as violent, dangerous, or untrustworthy, as if the accident of where they were born determines who they are.
One enemy
They tend to
remaining.
internalize many of these judgments and perhaps deep inside feel that they don't deserve much of what is considered good in this world. Those from the Hood who want to overcome this pronouncement of the outside world have to fight with double the energy and desperation. They have to convince themselves first that they are worth much more and can rise as far as they want through willpower. The intensity of their ambition becomes the deciding factor. It has to be supremely high. That is why the most ambitious and confident figures in history often emerge from the most impoverished and arduous of circumstances. For those of us who live outside such an environment, ambition has almost become a dirty word. It is associated with such historical types as Richard III or Richard Nixon. It reeks of insecurity and evil deeds to reach the top. People who want power so badly must have psychological problems, or so we think. Much of this social prudery around the idea of power and ambition comes from an unconscious guilt and desire to keep other people down. To those occupying a position of privilege, the ambitiousness of those from below seems like something scary and threatening. If you come from relative prosperity, you are more than likely tainted with some of this prejudice, and you must extirpate it as much as possible. If you believe ambition is ugly and needs to be disguised or repressed, you will have to tiptoe around others, making a show of false humility, in two minds every time you contemplate some necessary power move.
Right there.
If you see it as beautiful, as the driving force behind all great human accomplishments, then you will feel no guilt in raising your level of ambition as high as you want and pushing aside those who block your path. One of the most fearless men in history has to be the great 19th century abolitionist Frederick Douglass. He was born into the cruelest system known to man, slavery. It was designed in every detail to destroy a person's spirit. It did so by separating people from their families
30 seconds
so they
left.
could develop no real emotional attachments in their lives. It used constant threats and fear to break any sense of free will, and it made sure that slaves were kept illiterate and ignorant. They were to form only the lowest opinions of themselves. Douglass himself suffered all of these fates as a child, but somehow from his earliest
One
years he
enemy
believed
remaining.
that he was worth
10
much
seconds
more,
left.
that something
Spike
powerful had
down
been crushed,
A.
but that it could spring back to life. As a child, he saw himself escaping the clutches of slavery someday, and he nourished himself on that dream. Then in 1828, at the age of 10, Douglass was sent by his master to work in the home of a son-in-law in Baltimore, Maryland. Douglass read this as some kind of providence working in his favor. It meant he would escape the hard labor on the plantation and have more time to think. In Baltimore, the mistress of the house was constantly reading the Bible, and one day he asked her if she would teach him to read. She happily obliged, and he quickly learned. The master of the house heard of this and severely upbraided his wife. A slave must never be allowed to read and write. He forbade her to continue with the teachings. Douglass, however, could now manage on his own, getting books and dictionaries for himself on the sly. He memorized famous speeches, which he could go over in his mind at any time of day. He saw himself becoming a great orator, railing against the evils of slavery. With growing knowledge of the outside world, he came to resent even more bitterly the life he was forced to lead. This infected his attitude, and his owners sensed it. At the age of 15, he was sent to a farm run by a Mr. Covey, whose sole task in life was to break the spirit of a rebellious slave. Covey, however, was not successful. Douglas had already created in his mind an identity for himself that would not match what Covey wanted to impose on him. This image of his own high value, believed in with all his energy, would become reality. He maintained his inner freedom and his sanity. He converted all of the whippings and mistreatment into a spur for him to escape to the north. It gave him more material to someday share with the world on the evils of slavery. Several years later, Douglas managed to escape to the north. There he became a leading abolitionist, eventually founding his own newspaper and always pushing against the limits people tried to impose on him. Understand, people will constantly attack you in life. One of their main weapons will be to instill in you doubts about yourself, your worth, your abilities, your potential. They will often disguise this as their objective opinion, but invariably it has a political purpose. They want to keep you down. You are continually prone to believe these opinions, particularly if your self-image is fragile. In every moment of life, you can defy and deny people this power. You do so by maintaining a sense of purpose, a high destiny you are fulfilling. From such a position, people's attacks do not harm you. They only make you angry and more determined. The higher you raise this self-image, the fewer judgments and manipulations you will tolerate. This will translate into fewer obstacles in your path. If someone like Douglas could forge this attitude amid the most unfree of circumstances, then we should surely be able to find our own way to such inner strength. Keys to fearlessness: one's own free, untrammeled desires, one's own whim. All of this is precisely that which fits no classification, and which is constantly knocking all systems and theories to hell. And where did our sages get the idea that man must have normal, virtuous desires? What man needs is only his own independent wishing, whatever that independence may cost and wherever it may lead. Fyodor Dostoevsky. In today's world, our idea of freedom largely revolves around the ability to satisfy certain needs and desires. We feel free if we can gain the kind of employment we desire, buy the things we want, and engage in a wide range of behavior, as long as it does not harm others. According to this concept, freedom is something essentially passive. It is given and guaranteed to us by our government, often by not meddling in our affairs and various social groups. There is, however, a completely different concept of liberty. It is not something that people grant us as a privilege or right. It is a state of mind that we must work to attain and hold on to with much effort. It is something active and not passive. It comes from exercising free will. In our day-to-day affairs, much of our actions are not free and independent. We tend to conform to society's norms in behavior and thinking. We generally act out of habit without much thought as to why we do things. When we act with freedom, we ignore any pressures to conform. We step beyond our usual routines. Asserting our will and our individuality, we move on our own. Let us say we have a career that affords us enough money to live comfortably and offers us a reasonable future. But this job is not deeply satisfying. It doesn't lead us anywhere we want to go. Perhaps we also have to deal with a boss who is difficult and imperious. Our fears for the future, our comfortable habits, and our sense of propriety will compel us to stay on. All of these factors are forces that limit and confine us. But at any moment we could let go of the fear and leave the job. Not really certain where we are headed, but confident we can do better. In that moment we have exercised free will. It initiates from our own deepest desire and need. Once we leave, our mind must rise to the challenge.
Let's go.
To continue on this path, we have to take more independent actions, because we cannot depend on habits or friends to see us through. Free action has a momentum of its own. Many will argue that this idea of active freedom is basically an illusion. We are products of our environment, so they say. If people become successful, it is because they benefited from certain favorable social circumstances. They were in the right place at the right time. They got the proper education and mentoring. Their willpower played a part, no doubt, but a small part. If circumstances were different, so the argument goes, these types would not have had the success they had, no matter how strong their willpower. All kinds of statistics and studies can be trotted out to support
Spike
this
down
argument,
B.
but in the end this concept is merely a product of our times and the emphasis on passive freedom. It chooses to focus on circumstance
you
and
and me.
environment, as if the exceptionally free actions of a Frederick Douglass could also be explained by his physiology or the luck he had in learning to read. In the end, such a philosophy wants to deny the essential freedom we all possess to make a
Last
decision
player
independent
standing.
of outside forces. It wants to diminish individuality. We are just products of a social process, they imply. Understand, at any moment you could kick this philosophy and its ideas into the trash can by doing something irrational and unexpected, contrary to what you have done in the past, an act not possibly explained by your upbringing or nervous system. What prevents you from taking such action is not mommy, daddy, or society, but your own fears. You are essentially free to move beyond any limits others have set for you, to recreate yourself as thoroughly as you wish. If you had some terribly painful experience in the past, you could choose to let that pain sit there and you could soak in it. On the other hand, you could decide to convert it into anger, a cause to promote, or some form of action. Or you could choose to simply drop it and move on, relishing the freedom and power that brings you. No one can take away these options or force your response. It is all up to you. Moving to this more active form of freedom does not mean that you are giving yourself over to wild and ill-considered action. Your decision to alter a career path, for instance, is based on careful consideration of your strengths and deepest desires and the future you want. It comes from thinking for yourself and not accepting what others think about you. The risks you take are not emotional and for the sake of a thrill. They are calculated. The need to conform and please others will always play a role in our actions, consciously or unconsciously.
One enemy
To be
remaining.
completely free is impossible and undesirable. You are merely exploring a freer range of action in your life and the power it could bring you. What block us from moving in this direction are the pressures we feel to conform, our rigid, habitual patterns of thinking, and our self-doubts and fears. The following are 5 strategies to help you push past these limits. Defy all categories.
Breathe.
As a young girl growing up in Kansas at the turn of the 20th century, Amelia Earhart felt oddly out of place. She liked to do things her own way, playing rough games with the boys, spending hours by herself reading books, or disappearing on long hikes. She was prone to behavior that others considered strange and unorthodox. At boarding school, she was kicked out for walking on the roof in her nightgown. As she got older, she felt intense pressure to settle down and be more like other girls. Earhart had an abhorrence, however, of marriage and the constrictions it represented for women. So she looked for a career, trying her hand at all kinds of jobs. But she craved adventure and challenges, and the jobs available to her were menial and mindless. Then one day in 1920, she went for a short ride in an airplane, and suddenly she knew she had found her calling. She took lessons and became a pilot. In the air, she felt the freedom she had always been looking for. Piloting a plane was a constant challenge, physical and mental. She could express the daring side of her character, her love of adventure, as well as her interest in the mechanics of flying. Female pilots at the time were not taken seriously. The men were the ones who set records and blazed new paths. To combat this, Earhart had to push the limits as far as she could, doing feats of flying that would make headlines and contribute something to the profession. In 1932, she became the first woman to pilot a plane solo across the Atlantic, in what would turn out to be her most death-defying and physically arduous flight. In 1935, she contemplated doing a crossing of the Gulf of Mexico. One of the most famous male pilots of the time told her it was too dangerous and not worth the risk. Feeling there was a challenge in this, she decided to attempt the flight anyway and managed it with relative ease, showing others how it could be done. If at any moment in her life she had succumbed to the pressure to be more like others, she would have lost that magic that now seemed to follow her when she went her own direction. She decided to continue being herself, whatever the consequences might be. She dressed in her unconventional manner and spoke her mind on political matters, even though that was considered unbecoming. When the famous publicist and promoter George Putnam asked for her hand in marriage, Earhart accepted under the condition that he sign a contract guaranteeing he would respect her desires for maximum freedom within the relationship. People who met her invariably commented that she was not really masculine or feminine or even androgynous, but completely herself, a unique mix of qualities. It was this part of her that fascinated people and kept her in the limelight. In 1937, she attempted the riskiest flight of her career, to circle the world via the equator, including a stopover on a tiny island in the Pacific. She disappeared somewhere near the island, never to be found, all of which only added to the legend of Earhart as the consummate risk-taker who did everything her own way. Understand, the day you were born, you became engaged in a struggle that continues to this day and will determine your success or failure in life. You are an individual with ideas and skills that make you unique, but people are constantly trying to fit you into narrow categories that make you more predictable and easier to manage. They want to see you as shy or outgoing, sensitive or tough. If you succumb to this pressure, then you may gain some social acceptance, but you will lose the unconventional parts of your character that are the source of your uniqueness and power. You must resist this process at all costs, seeing people's neat and tidy judgments as a form of confinement. Your task is to retain or rediscover those aspects of your character that defy categorization, and to give them even greater play. Remaining unique, you will create something unique and inspire the kind of respect you would never receive from tepid conformity. Constantly reinvent yourself. As a child, the future President John F. Kennedy was extremely frail and prone to illness. He spent much time in various hospitals and grew up to be rather frail and weak-looking. From these experiences, he developed a horror of anything that made him feel that he had no control over his life. And one form of powerlessness particularly irked him, the judgments people made of him based on his appearance. They would see him as weak and fragile, underestimating his underlying strength of character. So he initiated a lifelong process of wresting this control from others, constantly recreating himself and casting the image that he wanted people to see of him. As a youth, he was perceived as the pleasure-loving son of a powerful father. So at the outbreak of World War II, despite his physical limitations, he enlisted in the Navy, determined to show another side of himself. As a lieutenant on a patrol torpedo in the Pacific, his boat was rammed and cut in two by a Japanese destroyer. He proceeded to lead his men to safety in a way that earned him numerous medals for bravery. During this incident, he displayed an almost callous disregard for his own life, perhaps in an attempt once and for all to prove his masculinity. In 1946, he decided to run for Congress, and he used his war record to craft the image of a young man who would be an equally fearless fighter for his constituency. A few years later, as a senator, he realized that many in the public perceived him as a bit of a lightweight, young and unproven. And so yet again, he chose to reinvent himself, this time by writing a book, authored with his speechwriter Theodore Sorensen, called Profiles in Courage, cataloging stories of famous senators who defied convention and achieved great things. The book won a Pulitzer Prize, and more important, it completely altered the image the public had of Kennedy. He was now seen as thoughtful and independent, somehow following the path of the senators he had written about, clearly an intended effect. In 1960, when Kennedy was running for president, people once again underestimated him. They saw him as the young Catholic liberal senator who could not possibly appeal to the majority of Americans. This time he decided to recast himself as the inspiring prophet who would lead the country out of the doldrums of the Eisenhower era, returning America to its frontier roots and creating a sense of unified purpose. It was an image of vigor and youth contrary to his still physical weakness, and it proved compelling enough to captivate the public and win the election. Understand, people judge you by appearances, the image you project through your actions, words, and style. If you do not take control of this process, then people will see and define you the way they want to, often to your detriment. You might think that being consistent with this image will make others respect and trust you, but in fact it is the opposite. Over time you seem predictable and weak. Consistency is an illusion anyway. Each passing day brings changes within you. You must not be afraid to express these evolutions. The powerful learn early in life that they have the freedom to mold their image, fitting the needs and moods of the moment. In this way, they keep others off balance and maintain an air of mystery. You must follow this path and find great pleasure in reinventing yourself, as if you were the author writing your own drama. Subvert your patterns. Animals depend on instincts and habits to survive. We as humans depend on our conscious, rational thinking, which gives us greater freedom of action, the ability to alter our behavior according to circumstance. And yet that animal part of our own nature, that compulsion to repeat the same things, tends to dominate our way of thinking. We succumb to mental patterns, which makes our actions repetitive as well. This was the problem that the great architect Frank Lloyd Wright was obsessed with, and he came up with a powerful solution. As a young architect in the 1890s, Wright could not understand
seconds
why
left.
most people in his profession chose to design buildings based on patterns. Houses had to follow a certain model determined by materials and cost. One style became popular and people copied it endlessly. Living in such a house or working in such offices would make people feel soulless,
Last
like
round in
cogs
the
in a
half.
machine. In nature, no two trees are ever the same. A forest is formed in a kind of random fashion, and that is its beauty. Wright was determined to follow this organic model rather than the mass-produced model of the machine age. Despite the cost and energy, he decided that no two buildings of his would ever be the same in any way. He would extend this to his own behavior and interactions with others. He took delight in being capricious, in doing the opposite of what colleagues and clients expected from him. This eccentric manner of working led to the creation of revolutionary designs that made him the most famous architect of his time. In 1934, he was commissioned by Edgar Kaufman, a Pittsburgh department store magnate, to design a vacation house facing a waterfall on Bear Creek in rural Pennsylvania. Wright needed to see the design in his mind before he could commit it to paper. For this project, nothing would come to him, and so he decided to play a game on himself. He simply ignored the work. Months went by. Finally, Kaufman had had enough and telephoned Wright. He demanded to see the design. Wright exclaimed that it was finished. Kaufman said he would be over in 2 hours
down
to look
B.
it over.
One
Wright's
enemy
associates were
remaining.
aghast. He had not yet penciled in one line. Nonplussed and with a rush of creative energy, he began to design the house. It would not face the waterfall, he decided, but
Switching
stand
sides.
over and incorporate it. When Kaufman saw the design, he was delighted. The house became known as Falling Water, often considered Wright's most beautiful creation. In essence, Wright had forced his mind to face the problem without research or preconceptions, completely in the moment. It was an exercise to free himself from prior habits and create something totally new. What often prevent us from using the mental fluidity and freedom that we naturally possess are the physical routines in our lives. We see the same people and do the same things, and our minds follow these patterns. The solution then is to break this up. For instance, we could deliberately indulge in some random, even irrational act. By taking an action we have never done before, we place ourselves in unfamiliar territory. Our minds naturally awaken to the novel situation. In a similar vein, we can force ourselves to take different routes, visit strange places, encounter different people, wake up at odd hours, or read books that challenge our minds instead of dull them. We should practice this when we feel particularly blocked and uncreative. In such moments, it is best to be ruthless with ourselves and our patterns. Create a sense of destiny. In the year 1428, soldiers stationed at the garrison at the French town of Vaucouleurs began to receive visits from a 16-year-old girl named Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc. She was the daughter of lowly peasants from a nearby poor village, and she repeated to these soldiers the same message. She had been chosen by God to rescue France from the desperate state it had fallen into. In the previous few years, the country had become overrun by English invaders, who now held the French king hostage in England. The English were on the verge of conquering the key French city of Orleans. The Dauphin, heir to the French throne, was languishing away at a castle in the country, choosing to do nothing. Jeanne had had visions from various saints who explained to her precisely what she must do.
Trust me,
Convince the Dauphin to give her troops to lead to Orleans, defeat the English there, and then lead the Dauphin to Reims, where he would be crowned the new king of France, to be known as Charles VII. Many people in France at the time were having such visions, and the soldiers who listened to Jeanne could not help but feel skeptical. But Jeanne was different from the others. Despite the soldiers' lack of interest, she kept returning with her usual message. Nothing could discourage her. She was fearless, moving unescorted among so many restless soldiers. She spoke plainly, like any peasant girl, but there was not a shred of doubt in her voice, and her eyes were lit up with conviction. She was certain of these visions and would not rest until she had fulfilled her destiny. Her explanations of what she would do were so detailed that they seemed to have the weight of reality. And so a few soldiers came to believe she was for real and set in motion a chain of events. They convinced the local governor to allow them to escort her to the Dauphin. The Dauphin eventually believed her story as well and gave her the troops she requested. The citizens of Orleans, convinced she was destined to be their savior, rallied to her side and helped her defeat the English. The momentum she brought to the French side continued for well over a year, until she was captured and sold to the English and, after a lengthy trial, burned at the stake as a witch. The story of Jeanne d'Arc demonstrates a simple principle. The higher your self-belief, the more your power to transform reality. Having supreme confidence makes you fearless and persistent, allowing you to overcome obstacles that stop most people in their tracks. It makes others believe in you as well. And the most intense form of self-belief is to feel a sense of destiny, impelling you forward. This destiny can come from otherworldly sources, or it can come from yourself. Think of it in these terms. You have a set of skills and experiences that make you unique. They point towards some life task that you were meant to accomplish. You see signs of this in the predilections of your youth, certain tasks you were naturally drawn to. When you are involved in this task, everything seems to flow more naturally. Believing you are destined to accomplish something does not make you passive or unfree, but the opposite.
Spike
You are
down
liberated
A.
of the normal doubts and
Last player
confusions that
standing.
plague us. You have a sense of purpose that guides you but does not chain you to one way of doing things. And when your willpower is so deeply engaged, it will push you past any limits or dangers. Bet on yourself. It is always easy to rationalize your own doubts and conservative instincts, particularly when times are tough. You will convince yourself that it is foolhardy to take any risks, that it is better to wait for when circumstances are more propitious. But this is a dangerous mentality. It signifies an overall lack of confidence in yourself that will carry over to better times. You will find it hard to rouse yourself out of your defensive posture. The truth is that the greatest inventions and advances in technology or business generally come in negative periods because there is a greater necessity for creative thinking and radical solutions that break with the past. These are moments that are ripe for opportunity. While others retrench and retreat, you must think of taking risks, trying new things, and looking at the future that will come out of the present crisis. You must always be prepared to place a bet on yourself, on your future, by heading in a direction that others seem to fear. This means you believe that if you fail, you have the inner resources to recover.
One
This
enemy
belief
remaining.
acts as a kind of mental safety net. When you move ahead on some new venture or direction, your mind will snap to attention. Your energy will be focused and intense. By making yourself feel the necessity to be creative, your mind will rise to the occasion. Reversal of perspective. For most of us, the words ego and egotism express something negative. Egotistical people have an oversized opinion of themselves. Instead of considering what is important for society, a group, or family, they think
Instinct only
first
goes
and
so
foremost
far.
of themselves and act upon
Skill
this.
covers the rest.
Their vision is narrowed to the point of seeing everything in reference to their needs and desires. But there is another way to look at it. We all have an ego, a sense of who we are. And this ego or self-relationship is either strong or weak. People with a weak ego do not have a secure sense of their worth or potential. They pay extra attention to the opinions of others. They might perceive anything as a personal attack or affront. They need constant attention and validation from others. To compensate for and disguise this fragility, they will often assume an arrogant, aggressive front. This needy, dependent, self-obsessed variety of ego is what we find irritating and distasteful. A strong ego, however, is completely different. People who have a solid sense of their own value and who feel secure about themselves have the capacity to look at the world with greater objectivity. They can be more considerate and thoughtful because they can get outside of themselves. People with a strong ego set up boundaries. Their sense of pride will not allow them to accept manipulative or hurtful behavior. We generally like to be around such types.
Last player
Their
standing.
confidence and strength is contagious. To have such a strong ego should be an ideal for all of us. So many people who attain the heights of power in this culture, celebrities for instance, have to make a show of false humility and modesty, as if they got as far as they did by accident and not by ego or ambition. They want to act as if they are no different from anyone else and are almost embarrassed by their power and success. These are all signs of a weak ego. As an egotist of the strong variety, you trumpet your individuality and take great pride in your accomplishments. If others cannot accept that or judge you as arrogant, that is their problem, not yours. We are free when our acts proceed from our entire personality, when they express it, when they exhibit that indefinable resemblance to it which we find occasionally between the artist and his work. Henri Bergson, Chapter 10. Confront your mortality, the sublime. In the face of our inevitable mortality, we can do one of two things. We can attempt to avoid the thought at all costs, clinging to the illusion that we have all the time in the world. Or we can confront this reality, accept and even embrace it, converting our consciousness of death into something positive and active. In adopting such a fearless philosophy, we gain a sense of proportion, become able to separate what is petty from what is truly important. Knowing our days to be numbered, we have a sense of urgency and mission. We can appreciate life all the
One
more
enemy
for its
remaining.
impermanence. If we can overcome the fear of death, then there is nothing left to fear. The hustler's metamorphosis. I had reached the point at which I was not afraid to die. This spirit made me a freeman in fact,
They're not getting the
while I
message.
remained a
Leave
slave
it to
in
me, I'll
form.
rough them up.
Frederick Douglass. By the mid-1990s, Curtis Jackson felt supremely dissatisfied with his life as a hustler. The only way up and out that he could see was music. He had some talent as a rapper, but that wouldn't get him very far in this world. He felt somewhat confused about how to break into the business, and he was impatient to begin the process. Then one evening in 1996, all of that changed. At a Manhattan nightclub, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, met the famous rapper and producer Jam Master Jay. He could sense that this was his one opportunity, and he would have to make the best of it. He talked Jay into letting him visit his studio the following day to hear him rap. There he managed to impress him enough that Jay agreed to serve as his mentor. It seemed that everything now would fall into place. 50 had saved money to tide him over while he moved into this new career, but it wouldn't last forever. Jay got him a few gigs, but they didn't pay. On the streets near his home, he would see his hustler friends doing well, while his funds would dwindle into nothing. What would he do when he ran out of money? He had already sold his car and jewelry. He had
One
recently
enemy
fathered a
remaining.
son with his girlfriend, and he needed money to support the child. He started to feel more impatient than ever. After much persistence, he got someone at Columbia Records to hear his music, and the label became interested in signing him to a deal. But to get out of a contract he had signed with Jay, he had to give him almost all of the advance money from Columbia. What was worse, at Columbia he now found himself lost amid all the other rappers signed to the label. His future looked more uncertain than ever. With his savings almost gone, he would now have to return to hustling on the streets, and this made him feel bitter. His former colleagues were not too happy to see him again. Feeling like he needed money fast, he became more aggressive than usual and made some enemies on the streets who began to threaten him. He had been splitting his time between the record studio and hustling, and his first album at Columbia was about to come out. But the label was doing nothing to promote it. Everything in his life seemed to be unraveling at the same time. Then one afternoon in May of 2000, as he got into the backseat of a friend's car, a young man suddenly appeared at the car window brandishing a gun and began firing at him at close range.
Last
The
player
bullets
standing.
went all over, 9 of them piercing his body, including one that opened a giant hole in his jaw. The assassin then hurried away to an awaiting car, certain he had done his job with the shot to 50's head. 50's friends quickly drove him to the nearest hospital. As it all unfolded, the event itself didn't appear real to him. It was like a movie, something he had seen happen to others. But at one point, while he was being operated on, he sensed that he was close to death, and suddenly it all seemed very real. A searing light flooded his eyes, and for a few seconds a shadow crept over it, while everything else came to a stop. It was an oddly calm moment. Then it passed. In the months to come, he would stay in his grandparents' house, recovering from the near mortal wounds he had suffered. As he regained his strength, he could almost laugh at the whole thing. He had cheated death. Of course, for hustlers in the hood, this was no big deal and nobody would feel sorry for him. He had to move on and not look back, while also keeping an eye on the killers who would be looking to finish the job. In the wake of the shooting, Columbia had canceled his album and dropped him from the label. He was surrounded by too much violence. 50 would get his revenge. He would launch the kind of mixtape campaign on the streets that would make him famous, and those same executives would come back, begging to sign him. As he geared up for action, however, he noticed that something had changed inside him. He found himself getting up earlier than usual in the morning and writing songs late into the night, completely immersed in his work. When it came to distributing his tapes on the streets, he didn't care about making money in the present. He couldn't care less anymore about clothes, jewelry, or nightlife. Every penny he made he poured back into the campaign. He didn't pay attention to all of the petty squabbles others were trying to drag him into. His eyes were focused on one thing alone, and nothing else mattered. Some days he would work with an intensity that surprised him. He was putting everything he had into this one shot at success. There was no plan B. In the back of his mind, he knew that it was that moment near death that had changed him for good. He could still feel the original sensation in his body, the light and the shadow, and it filled him with a sense of urgency he had never experienced before, as if death were on his heels. In the months before the shooting, everything had been falling apart. Now it was all falling into place, like destiny. Years later, as he amassed his business empire, 50 began to encounter more and more people playing strange power games. A company that had partnered with him would suddenly want to renegotiate their contract or act skittish and consider pulling out, acting as if they had just found out about his notorious past. Perhaps it was just a ruse to squeeze out better terms. Then there were those at his record label who treated him with increasing disrespect and offered him meager publicity or marketing money in a take-it-or-leave-it ploy. Finally, there were those who had worked for him from the beginning, but now, smelling money from his success, began to make unreasonable demands. Certain things mattered to him more than anything else. Maintaining his long-term mobility, working with those who were excited and not mercenary, controlling his image and not muddying it for the sake of quick money. What this translated into was simple. He would exercise his power to walk away from any situation or person that compromised these values. He would tell the company trying to renegotiate terms that he was no longer interested in working with them. With the record label, he would ignore the ploy and pour his own money into the marketing of his album, with the idea of leaving them soon and striking out on his own. He would cut loose the former friends without a second thought. In his experience, whenever he felt as if he had too much to lose and he held on to others or to deals out of fear of the alternative, he ended up losing a lot more. He realized that the key in life is to always be willing to walk away. He was often surprised that in doing so, or even feeling that way, people would come back to him on his terms, now fearing what they might lose in the process. And if they didn't return, then good riddance. If he had thought about it at the time, he would have realized that turning his back in this way was an attitude and philosophy that had crystallized in his mind that afternoon of the shooting, when death had brushed against him. Clinging to people or situations out of fear is like desperately holding on to life on even the worst terms, and he had now moved far beyond such a point. He was not afraid of death, so how could he be afraid of anything anymore? The fearless approach. People talk about my getting shot like it represented something special.
One enemy
they
remaining.
act like they're not facing the same thing. But someday, everybody has to face a bullet with his or her name on it. 50 Cent. With the language skills that our primitive ancestors developed, we humans became rational creatures, gaining the ability to look into the future and dominate the environment. But with this good came a bad that has caused us endless suffering. Unlike any other animal, we are conscious of our mortality. This is the source of all our fears. This consciousness of death is nothing more than a thought of the future that awaits us. But this thought is associated with intense pain and separation. It comes with an attendant thought that occasionally haunts us. What good is it to work so hard, defer immediate pleasures, and accumulate money and power if one day, perhaps tomorrow, we die? Death seems to cancel out all our efforts and make things meaningless. If we were to give ourselves up to these two trains of thought, the pain and the meaninglessness, we would almost be paralyzed into inaction or driven to suicide. But consciously and unconsciously, we invented two solutions to this awareness. The most primitive was the creation of the concept of an afterlife that would alleviate our fears and give our actions in the present much meaning. The second solution, the one that has come to dominate our thinking in the present, is to attempt to forget our mortality and bury ourselves in the moment. This means actively repressing any thought of death itself. To aid in this, we distract our minds with routines and banal concerns. Occasionally, we are reminded of our fear when someone close to us dies, but generally we have developed the habit of drowning it out with our daily concerns. The problem, however, is that this repression is not really effective. We generally become conscious of our mortality at the age of 4 or 5. At that moment, such a thought had a profound impact on our psyches. We associated it with feelings of separation from loved ones, with any kind of darkness, chaos, or the unknown, and it troubled us deeply. This fear has sat inside of us ever since. It is impossible to completely eradicate or avoid such an immense thought. It sneaks in through another door, seeps into our behavior in ways we cannot even begin to imagine. Death represents the ultimate reality, a limit to our days and efforts in a definitive fashion. We have to face it alone and leave behind all that we know and love. a complete separation. It is associated with physical and mental pain. To
Last
repress
player
the thought,
standing.
we must then avoid anything that reminds us of death.
Defenders
We
win.
therefore indulge in all kinds of fantasies and illusions, struggling to keep out of our minds any kind of hard and unavoidable reality. We cling to jobs, relationships, and comfortable positions, all to elude the feeling of separation. We grow overly conservative because any kind of risk might entail adversity, failure, or pain. We keep ourselves surrounded by others to drown out the thought of our essential aloneness. We may not be consciously aware of this, but in the end we expend an intense amount of psychic energy in these repressions. The fear of death does not go away. It merely returns in smaller anxieties and habits that limit our enjoyment of life. There is a third and fearless way, however, to deal with mortality. From the moment we are born, we carry inside ourselves our death. It is not some outside event that ends our days, but something within us. We have only so many days to live. This amount of time is something unique to us. It is ours alone, our only true possession. If we run away from this reality by avoiding the thought of death, we are really running away from ourselves. We are denying the one thing that cannot be denied. We are living a lie. The fearless approach requires that you accept the fact that you have only so much time to live, and that life itself inevitably involves levels of pain and separation. By embracing this, you embrace life itself and accept everything about it. Depending on a belief in an afterlife or drowning yourself in the moment to avoid pain is to despise reality, which is to despise life itself. When you choose to affirm life by confronting your mortality, everything changes. What matters to you now is to live your days well, as fully as possible. You could choose to do this by pursuing endless pleasures, but nothing becomes boring more quickly than having to always search for new distractions. If attaining certain goals becomes your greatest source of pleasure, then your days are filled with purpose and direction, and whenever death comes, you have no regrets. You do not fall into nihilistic thinking about the futility of it all, because that is a supreme waste of the brief time you have been given. You now have a way of measuring what matters in life. Compared to the shortness of your days, petty battles and anxieties have no weight. You have a sense of urgency and commitment. What you do, you must do well, with all of your energy, not with a mind shooting off in 100 directions. To accomplish this is remarkably simple. It is a matter of looking inward and seeing death as something that you carry within. It is a part of you that cannot be repressed. It does not mean that you brood about it, but that you have continual awareness of a reality that you come to embrace. You convert the terrified, denial-type relationship to death into something active and positive, finally released from pettiness, useless anxieties, and fearful, timid responses. This third, fearless way of approaching death originated in the ancient world, in the philosophy known as Stoicism. The core of Stoicism is learning the art of how to die, which paradoxically teaches you how to live. And perhaps the greatest Stoic writer in the ancient world was Seneca the Younger, born around 4 BC. As a young man, Seneca was an extremely gifted orator, which led to a promising political career. But as part of a pattern that would continue throughout his life, this gift incurred the envy of those who felt inferior. In AD 41, with trumped-up charges from an envious courtier, Emperor Claudius banished Seneca to the island of Corsica, where he would languish essentially alone for 8 long years. Seneca had been familiar with Stoic philosophy, but now on this barely inhabited island he would have to practice it in real life. It was not easy. He found himself indulging in all kinds of fantasies and falling into despair. It was a constant struggle, reflected in his many letters to friends back in Rome. But slowly he conquered all of his fears by first conquering his fear of death. He practiced all kinds of mental exercises, imagining painful forms of death and possible tragic endings. He would make them familiar and not frightening. He used a sense of shame. To fear his mortality would mean he abhorred nature itself, which decreed the death of all living things, and that would mean he was inferior to the smallest animal that accepted its death without complaint. Slowly, he extirpated this fear and felt a sense of liberation. Feeling that he had a mission to communicate this newfound power of his to the world, he wrote at a furious pace. In AD 49, he was finally exonerated, recalled to Rome, and appointed to a high position as praetor and private tutor to the 12-year-old boy Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, soon to be known as Emperor Nero. During the first 5 years of Nero's reign, Seneca was the de facto ruler of the Roman Empire, as the young emperor gave himself over to the pleasures that were to later dominate his life. Seneca had to constantly struggle to rein in some of Nero's violent tendencies, but for the most part those years were prosperous and the empire was well governed. Then envy set in again, and Nero's courtiers began spreading stories that Seneca was enriching himself at the expense of the state. By AD 62, Seneca could see the writing on the wall, and he retired from public life to a country house, handing over almost all of his wealth to Nero. In AD 65, he was implicated in a plot to kill the emperor, and an officer was sent to, in the Roman style, order Seneca to kill himself. He calmly asked permission to review his will. This was refused. He turned to his friends who were present and said, "Being forbidden to show gratitude for your services, I leave you my one remaining possession and my best, the pattern of my life." Now he would be reenacting what he had rehearsed in his mind so many years before. His ensuing suicide was horrifically difficult. He sliced the veins in his arms and ankles, sat in a hot bath to make the blood flow faster, and even drank poison. The death was slow and incredibly painful, but he maintained his calmness to the end, making sure that everyone would see that his death matched his life and his philosophy. As Seneca understood, to free yourself from fear you must work backward. You start with the thought of your mortality. You accept and embrace this reality. You think ahead to the inevitable moment of your death and determine to face it as bravely as possible. The more you contemplate your mortality, the less you fear it. It becomes a fact you no longer have to repress. By following this path, you know how to die well, and so you can now begin to teach yourself to live well. You will not cling to things unnecessarily. You will be strong and self-reliant, unafraid to be alone. You will have a certain lightness that comes with knowing what matters. You can laugh at what others take so seriously. The pleasures of the moment are heightened because you know their impermanence and you make the most of them. And when your time to die comes, as it will someday, you will not cringe and cry for more time, because you have lived well and have no regrets. Keys to fearlessness. There seems to hover somewhere in that dark part of all our lives an objectless, timeless, spaceless element of primal fear and dread. Stemming, perhaps, from our birth, a fear and dread which exercises an impelling influence upon our lives. And, accompanying this first fear, is, for the want of a better name, a reflex urge toward ecstasy, complete submission, and trust. Richard Wright. In the past, our relationship to death was much more physical and direct. We would routinely see animals killed before our eyes, for food or sacrifices. During times of plague or natural disasters, we would witness countless deaths. Graveyards were not hidden away but would occupy the center of cities or adjoin churches. People would die in their homes, surrounded by friends and families. This nearness of death increased the fear of it but also made it seem more natural, much more a part of life. To mediate this fear, religion would play a powerful and important role. The dread of death, however, has always remained intense, and with the waning of the power of religion to soothe our anxieties, we found it necessary to create a modern solution to the problem. We have almost completely banished the physical presence of death. We do not see the animals being slaughtered for our food. Cemeteries occupy outlying areas and are not part of our consciousness. In hospitals, the dying are cloistered from sight, everything made as antiseptic as possible. That we are not aware of this phenomenon is a sign of the deep repression that has taken place. We see countless images of death in movies and in the media, but this has a paradoxical effect. Death is made to seem like something abstract, nothing more than an image on the screen. It becomes something visual and spectacular, not a personal event that awaits us. We may be obsessed with death in the movies we watch, but this only makes it harder to confront our mortality. The word sublime comes from the Latin, meaning up to the threshold or doorway. It is a thought or experience that takes us to the threshold of death, giving us a physical intimation of this ultimate mystery, something so large and vast it eludes our powers of description. It is a reflection of death in life, but it comes in the form of something that inspires awe. To fear and avoid our mortality is debilitating. To experience it in the sublime is therapeutic. Children have this encounter with the sublime quite often, particularly when confronted with something too vast and incomprehensible for their understanding. Darkness, the night sky, the idea of infinity, the sense of time in millions of years, a strange sense of affinity with an animal, etc. We too have these moments in the form of any intense experience that is hard to express in words. It can come to us in moments of extreme exhaustion or exertion, when our bodies are pushed to the limit, in travel to some unusual place, or in absorbing a work of art that is too packed with ideas or images for us to process rationally. The French call an orgasm le petit mort, or little death, and the sublime is a kind of mental orgasm, as the mind becomes flooded with something that is too much or too different. It is the shadow of death overlapping our conscious minds, but inspiring a sense of something vital and even ecstatic. Understand, to keep death out, we bathe our minds in banality and routines. We create the illusion that it is not around us in any form. This gives us a momentary peace, but we lose all sense of connection to something larger, to life itself. We are not really living until we come to terms with our mortality. Becoming aware of the sublime around us is a way to convert our fears into something meaningful and active to counter the repressions of our culture. The sublime in any form tends to evoke feelings of awe and power. Through awareness of what it is, we can open our minds to the experience and actively search it out. The following are the 4 sensations of a sublime moment and how to conjure them. The sense of rebirth. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, Ernest Hemingway felt completely suffocated by all the conformity and banality of life there. It made him feel dead inside. He yearned to explore the wider world, and so in 1917, at the age of 18, he volunteered as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross in Italy, at one of the war fronts. There he felt himself oddly impelled towards death and danger. In one incident, he was nearly killed by exploding shrapnel, and the experience forever altered his way of thinking. I died then. I felt my soul or something coming right out of my body, like you'd pull a silk handkerchief out of a pocket by one corner. This feeling remained in the back of his mind for months and years to come, and it was oddly exhilarating. Surviving death in this way made him feel like he was reborn inside. Now he could write of his experiences and make his work vibrate with emotion. This feeling, however, would fade. He would be forced into some boring journalistic job or the routines of married life. That inner deadness returned and his writing would suffer. He needed to feel that closeness to death in life again. To do so, he would have to expose himself to new dangers. This meant reporting on frontline activity in the Spanish Civil War, and later covering the bloodiest battles in France in World War II, in both cases going beyond reporting and involving himself in combat. He took up bullfighting, deep-sea fishing, and big game hunting. He would suffer innumerable auto and airplane accidents, but that would only spur his need for more risk. Out of each experience, that sensation of being sparked back to life would return, and he could find his way to yet another novel. This feeling of having your soul pulled out of your body like a handkerchief is the essence of a sublime sensation. For Hemingway, it could be conjured only by something extreme, by a brush with death itself. We, however, can feel the sensation and its reviving benefits in smaller doses. Whenever life feels particularly dull or confining, we can force ourselves to leave familiar ground. This could mean traveling to some particularly exotic location, attempting something physically challenging, a sea voyage or scaling a mountain, or simply embarking on a new venture in which we are not certain we can succeed. In each case, we are experiencing a moment of powerlessness in the face of something large and overwhelming. This feeling of control slipping out of our hands, however short and slight, is a brush with death. We may not make it, we have to raise our level of effort. In the process, our minds are exposed to new sensations. When we finish the voyage or task and come to safe ground, we feel as if we are reborn. We felt that slight pull of the handkerchief. We now have a heightened appreciation for life and a desire to live it more fully. The sense of evanescence and urgency. The first half of the 14th century in Japan was a time of intense turmoil. Palace coups and civil wars turned the country upside down. Those of the educated classes felt particularly disturbed by this chaos. In the midst of all this revolution, a low-ranking palace poet later known as Kenko decided to take his vows and become a Buddhist monk. But instead of retiring to a monastery, he remained in the capital, Kyoto, and quietly observed life around him as the country seemed to fall apart. He wrote a series of short pieces that were not published in his lifetime but were later collected and printed under the name Essays in Idleness, the fame of this book increasing with time. Many of his observations centered on death, which was all too present in that period. But his thoughts around death went the opposite direction of brooding and morbidity. He found in them something pleasurable and even ecstatic. For instance, He pondered the evanescence of beautiful things such as cherry blossoms or youth itself. If man were never to fade away like the dews of Adashino, never to vanish like the smoke over Toribima, but lingered on forever in the world, how things would lose their power to move us. The most precious thing in life is its uncertainty. This made him think of insects that lived for only a day or a week, and yet how crowded such time could be. It is the shadow of death that makes everything poignant and meaningful to us. Kenko continually found new ways to measure the vastness of time as it stretches into eternity. A man was buried one day in a cemetery in view of Kenko's residence in Kyoto, the grave marker surrounded by grieving members of the family. As the years went by, he wrote, they would come less and less often, their feelings of sorrow slowly fading away. Within a span of time, they would all be dead, and with them the memory of the man they had buried. The grave marker would become largely covered by grass. Those who would pass by centuries later would see it as a weird mix of stone and nature. Eventually, it would disappear altogether, dissolving into the earth. In the face of this undeniable reality, of this eternal expanse, how can we not feel the preciousness of the present? It is a miracle to be alive even one more day. There are two kinds of time we can experience, the banal and the sublime variety. Banal time is extremely limited in scope. It consists of the present moment and stretches out to a few weeks ahead of us, occasionally farther. Locked in banal time, we tend to distort events. We see things as being far more important than they are, unaware that in a few weeks or a year, what stirs us all up will not matter. The sublime variety is an intimation of the reality of the utter vastness of time and the constant changes that are going on. It requires that we lift our heads out of the moment and engage in the kinds of meditations that obsessed Kenko. We imagine the future centuries from now or what was happening in this very spot millions of years ago. We become aware that everything is in a state of flux. Nothing is permanent. Contemplating sublime time has innumerable positive effects. It makes us feel a sense of urgency to get things done now, gives us a better grasp of what really matters, and instills a heightened appreciation of the passage of time, the poignancy and beauty of all things that fade away. The sense of awe. We are creatures that live in language. Everything we think and feel is framed by words, which never really quite express reality. They are merely symbols. Throughout history, people have had all kinds of unique experiences in which they witness something that exceeds the capacity to express it in words, and this elicits a feeling of awe. In 1915, the great explorer Ernest Shackleton found himself and his crew marooned on an ice floe near the continent of Antarctica. For months, they floated in this desolate landscape, before managing to rescue themselves later the following year. During the time on the floe, Shackleton felt as if he were visiting the planet before humans had arrived on the scene. Seeing something unchanged for millions of years, and despite the threat of death this scene represented, he felt oddly exhilarated. In the 1960s, the neurologist Oliver Sacks worked on patients who had been in a coma since the 1920s, victims of the sleeping sickness epidemic of the time. Thanks to a new drug, they were awakened from this coma and he recorded their thoughts. He realized that they viewed reality in a much different way than anyone else did, which made him wonder about our own perception of the world. Perhaps we see only a part of what is happening around us because our mental powers are determined by habits and conventions. There could be a reality we are missing. During such meditations, he slipped into a sense of the sublime. In the 1570s, a Huguenot pastor named Jean de Larry was one of the first Westerners to live among the Brazilian tribes in the Bay of Rio. He observed all kinds of rituals that frightened him in their barbarity. But then one evening he heard tribesmen singing in a way that was so strange and unearthly, he was overwhelmed with a sudden sense of awe. I stood there transported with delight, he later wrote. Whenever I remember it, my heart trembles, and it seems their voices are still in my ears. This sense of awe can be elicited by something vast or strange, endless landscapes, the sea or the desert, monuments from the distant past, the pyramids of Egypt, the unfamiliar customs of people in a foreign land. It can also be sparked by things in everyday life, for instance, focusing on the dizzying variety of animal and plant life around us that took millions of years to evolve into its present form. The philosopher Immanuel Kant, who wrote about the sublime, felt it in holding a swallow in his hands and gazing into its eye, feeling a strange connection between the two of them. It can be created by particular exercises in thinking. Imagine, for example, that you had always been blind and were suddenly granted sight. Everything you saw around you would seem strange and new, the freakish form of trees, the garishness of the color green. Or try imagining the earth in its actual smallness, a speck in vast space. The sublime on this level is merely a way of looking at things in their actual strangeness. This frees you from the prison of language and routine, this artificial world we live in. Experiencing this awe on any scale is like a sudden blast of reality, therapeutic and inspiring. The sense of the oceanic, the connection to all life. In not confronting our mortality, we tend to entertain certain illusions about death. We believe that some deaths are more important or meaningful than others, that of a celebrity or prominent politician, for instance. We feel that some deaths are more tragic, coming too early or from some accident. The truth, however, is that death makes no such discriminations. It is the ultimate equalizer. It strikes rich and poor alike. For everyone, it seems to come too early and can be experienced as tragic. Absorbing this reality should have a positive effect upon us all. We share the same fate with everyone. We all deserve the same degree of compassion. It is what ultimately links all of us together, and when we look at the people around us, we should see their mortality as well. This can be extended further and further into the sublime. Death is what links us to all living creatures as well. One organism must die so another can live. It is an endless process that we are a part of. This is what is known as an oceanic feeling, the sensation that we are not separated from the outside world, but that we are part of life in all its forms. Feeling this at moments inspires an ecstatic reaction, the very opposite of a morbid reflection on death. Reversal of perspective. In our normal perspective, we see death as something diametrically opposed to life, a separate event that ends our days. As such, it is a thought that we must dread, avoid, and repress. But this is false, an idea that is actually born out of our fear. Life and death are inextricably intertwined, not separate. The one cannot exist without the other. From the moment we are born, we carry our death within ourselves as a continual possibility. If we try to avoid or repress the thought, keep death on the outside, we are cutting ourselves off from life as well. If we are afraid of death, then we are afraid of life. We must turn this perspective around and face reality from within, finding a way to accept and embrace death as part of being alive. Only from such a position can we begin to overcome the fear of our mortality, and then all of the smaller fears that plague our lives. When I nearly died, it made me think, this can happen again any second. I better hurry and do what I want. I started to live like I never lived before. When the fear of death is gone, then nothing can bother you and nobody can stop you. 50 Cent. Acknowledgements. This book is dedicated to my Nana, a woman of strength, power, and great determination. She instilled in me knowledge. There is no knowledge that is not power. 50 Cent. First and foremost, my thanks go to Anna Biller for her loving support, her deft editing of the 50th Law, and her other innumerable contributions to the book. The 50th Law owes its existence to Mark Gerald, 50's literary agent. He brought 50 and me together in the first place and skillfully guided the project from start to finish. I must also thank my agent, Michael Carlisle at Inkwell Management, for his equally invaluable contributions, his assistant at Inkwell, Ethan Basoff, and Robert Miller, publisher extraordinaire of Harper Studio, who played such an important role in shaping the concept of the book. Also at Harper Studio, I would like to thank Debbie Steer, Sarah Birmingham, Katie Salisbury, Kim Lewis, and Nikki Cutler, and for their work on the design of the book, Leah Karslan-Stanisic and Mary Shuck. I would like to thank Ryan Holiday for his research assistance, Dov Charney for his support and inspiration, my good friend Lamont Jones for our many discussions on the subject, and Jeffrey Beneker, assistant professor in the Incomparable Classics Department at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, for his scholarly advice. On 50's side, his management group, Violator, gave me tremendous support on the project. For this, I must thank first and foremost Chris Lighty, CEO of Violator and the man behind the throne. Also giving generously of their time were Theo Settlemare, 50's attorney and business manager, Lori Dobbins, president of Violator, Barry Williams, brand manager, Anthony Butler, better known as AB, Bubba, and HOV. Special mention as well goes to Joey P., co-founder of Brand Asset Digital, and to Nikki Martin, president of G-Unit Records, for her invaluable insights on 50 from his earliest days in the business. I would like to thank as well Tony Yeo, Busta Rhymes, Paul Rosenberg, president of Shady Records and Eminem's manager, the novelist Nikki Turner, Quincy Jones III, and Kevin and Tiffany Childs over at Don Diva. I would like to give special mention to George June Bishop for giving me the Southside tour and helping me understand the rich world of hustling. Finally, for their immeasurable support during the writing of the book, I would like to thank my mother, Laurette, my sister, Leslie, and as always, my cat, Brutus. Robert Greene, also by 50 Cent. 50 by 50, 50 Cent in his own words from Pieces to Weight. Once Upon a Time in Southside Queens. Also by Robert Greene, The Art of Seduction, The 33 Strategies of War, The 48 Laws of Power, Copyright, The 50th Law, Copyright 2009 by G-Unit Books Incorporated, and Robert Greene. All rights reserved under international and Pan-American copyright conventions. By payment of the required fees, you have been granted the non-exclusive, non-transferable right to access and read the text of this ebook on screen. No part of this text may be reproduced, transmitted, downloaded, decompiled, reverse engineered, or stored in or introduced into any information storage and retrieval system, in any form or by any means, whether electronic or mechanical, now known or hereinafter invented, without the express written permission of HarperCollins eBooks. Adobe Digital Edition, July 2009, ISBN 978-0-6-1959-1-0-109876543321. About the publisher. Australia. HarperCollins Publishers. Australia. Proprietary. Limited 25 Ryde Road, P.O. Box 321, Pymble, New South Wales 2073. Australia. http://www.harpercollinsebooks.com.au Canada. HarperCollins Publishers Limited, 55 Avenue Road, Suite 2900, Toronto, Ontario, M5R 3L2. Canada. http://www.harpercollinsebooks. CA New Zealand. HarperCollins Publishers, New Zealand, Limited, P.O. Box 1, Auckland, New Zealand. http://www.harpercollins.nz United Kingdom. HarperCollins Publishers Limited, 77 to 85, Fulham Palace Road, London, W6 8JB. UK. http://www.harpercollinsebooks.co. UK. United States. HarperCollins Publishers Incorporated, 10 East 53rd Street, New York, New York 10022. http://www.harpercollinsebooks.com. Table of Contents. Title page. Contents. Forward. Introduction. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Chapter 9. Chapter 10. Acknowledgements. Other books by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. Copyright. About, but it comes in the form of something that inspires awe. To fear and avoid our mortality is debilitating. To experience it in the sublime is therapeutic. Children have this encounter with the sublime quite often, particularly when confronted with something too vast and incomprehensible for their understanding. Darkness, the night sky, the idea of infinity, the sense of time in millions of years, a strange sense of affinity with an animal, etc. We too have these moments in the form of any intense experience that is hard to express in words. It can come to us in moments of extreme exhaustion or exertion, when our bodies are pushed to the limit, in travel to some unusual place, or in absorbing a work of art that is too packed with ideas or images for us to process rationally. The French call an orgasm le petit mort, or little death, and the sublime is a kind of mental orgasm, as the mind becomes flooded with something that is too much or too different. It is the shadow of death overlapping our conscious minds, but inspiring a sense of something vital and even ecstatic. Understand, to keep death out, we bathe our minds in banality and routines. We create the illusion that it is not around us in any form. This gives us a momentary peace, but we lose all sense of connection to something larger, to life itself. We are not really living until we come to terms with our mortality. Becoming aware of the sublime around us is a way to convert our fears into something meaningful and active to counter the repressions of our culture. The sublime in any form tends to evoke feelings of awe and power. Through awareness of what it is, we can open our minds to the experience and actively search it out. The following are the 4 sensations of a sublime moment and how to conjure them. The sense of rebirth. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago at the turn of the 20th century, Ernest Hemingway felt completely suffocated by all the conformity and banality of life there. It made him feel dead inside. He yearned to explore the wider world, and so in 1917, at the age of 18, he volunteered as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross in Italy, at one of the war fronts. There he felt himself oddly impelled towards death and danger. In one incident, he was nearly killed by exploding shrapnel, and the experience forever altered his way of thinking. I died then. I felt my soul or something coming right out of my body, like you'd pull a silk handkerchief out of a pocket by one corner. This feeling remained in the back of his mind for months and years to come, and it was oddly exhilarating. Surviving death in this way made him feel like he was reborn inside. Now he could write of his experiences and make his work vibrate with emotion. This feeling, however, would fade. He would be forced into some boring journalistic job or the routines of married life. That inner deadness returned and his writing would suffer. He needed to feel that closeness to death in life again. To do so, he would have to expose himself to new dangers. This meant reporting on frontline activity in the Spanish Civil War, and later covering the bloodiest battles in France in World War II, in both cases going beyond reporting and involving himself in combat. He took up bullfighting, deep-sea fishing, and big game hunting. He would suffer innumerable auto and airplane accidents, but that would only spur his need for more risk. Out of each experience, that sensation of being sparked back to life would return, and he could find his way to yet another novel. This feeling of having your soul pulled out of your body like a handkerchief is the essence of a sublime sensation. For Hemingway, it could be conjured only by something extreme, by a brush with death itself. We, however, can feel the sensation and its reviving benefits in smaller doses. Whenever life feels particularly dull or confining, we can force ourselves to leave familiar ground. This could mean traveling to some particularly exotic location, attempting something physically challenging, a sea voyage or scaling a mountain, or simply embarking on a new venture in which we are not certain we can succeed. In each case, we are experiencing a moment of powerlessness in the face of something large and overwhelming. This feeling of control slipping out of our hands, however short and slight, is a brush with death. We may not make it, we have to raise our level of effort. In the process, our minds are exposed to new sensations. When we finish the voyage or task and come to safe ground, we feel as if we are reborn. We felt that slight pull of the handkerchief. We now have a heightened appreciation for life and a desire to live it more fully. The sense of evanescence and urgency. The first half of the 14th century in Japan was a time of intense turmoil. Palace coups and civil wars turned the country upside down. Those of the educated classes felt particularly disturbed by this chaos. In the midst of all this revolution, a low-ranking palace poet later known as Kenko decided to take his vows and become a Buddhist monk. But instead of retiring to a monastery, he remained in the capital, Kyoto, and quietly observed life around him as the country seemed to fall apart. He wrote a series of short pieces that were not published in his lifetime but were later collected and printed under the name Essays in Idleness, the fame of this book increasing with time. Many of his observations centered on death, which was all too present in that period. But his thoughts around death went the opposite direction of brooding and morbidity. He found in them something pleasurable and even ecstatic. For instance, he pondered the evanescence of beautiful things such as cherry blossoms or youth itself. If man were never to fade away like the dews of Adashino, never to vanish like the smoke over Toribima, but lingered on forever in the world, how things would lose their power to move us. The most precious thing in life is its uncertainty. This made him think of insects that lived for only a day or a week, and yet how crowded such time could be. It is the shadow of death that makes everything poignant and meaningful to us. Kenko continually found new ways to measure the vastness of time, as it stretches into eternity. A man was buried one day in a cemetery in view of Kenko's residence in Kyoto, the grave marker surrounded by grieving members of the family. As the years went by, he wrote, they would come less and less often, their feelings of sorrow slowly fading away. Within a span of time, they would all be dead, and with them the memory of the man they had buried. The grave marker would become largely covered by grass. Those who would pass by centuries later would see it as a weird mix of stone and nature. Eventually, it would disappear altogether, dissolving into the earth. In the face of this undeniable reality, of this eternal expanse, how can we not feel the preciousness of the present? It is a miracle to be alive even one more day. There are two kinds of time we can experience, the banal and the sublime variety. Banal time is extremely limited in scope. It consists of the present moment and stretches out to a few weeks ahead of us, occasionally farther. Locked in banal time, we tend to distort events. We see things as being far more important than they are, unaware that in a few weeks or a year, what stirs us all up will not matter. The sublime variety is an intimation of the reality of the utter vastness of time and the constant changes that are going on. It requires that we lift our heads out of the moment and engage in the kinds of meditations that obsessed Kenko. We imagine the future centuries from now or what was happening in this very spot millions of years ago. We become aware that everything is in a state of flux. Nothing is permanent. Contemplating sublime time has innumerable positive effects. It makes us feel a sense of urgency to get things done now, gives us a better grasp of what really matters, and instills a heightened appreciation of the passage of time, the poignancy and beauty of all things that fade away. The sense of awe. We are creatures that live in language. Everything we think and feel is framed by words, which never really quite express reality. They are merely symbols. Throughout history, people have had all kinds of unique experiences in which they witness something that exceeds the capacity to express it in words, and this elicits a feeling of awe. In 1915, the great explorer Ernest Shackleton found himself and his crew marooned on an ice floe near the continent of Antarctica. For months, they floated in this desolate landscape, before managing to rescue themselves later the following year. During the time on the floe, Shackleton felt as if he were visiting the planet before humans had arrived on the scene. Seeing something unchanged for millions of years, and despite the threat of death this scene represented, he felt oddly exhilarated. In the 1960s, the neurologist Oliver Sacks worked on patients who had been in a coma since the 1920s, victims of the sleeping sickness epidemic of the time. Thanks to a new drug, they were awakened from this coma and he recorded their thoughts. He realized that they viewed reality in a much different way than anyone else did, which made him wonder about our own perception of the world. Perhaps we see only a part of what is happening around us because our mental powers are determined by habits and conventions. There could be a reality we are missing. During such meditations, he slipped into a sense of the sublime. In the 1570s, a Huguenot pastor named Jean de Larry was one of the first Westerners to live among the Brazilian tribes in the Bay of Rio. He observed all kinds of rituals that frightened him in their barbarity. But then one evening he heard tribesmen singing in a way that was so strange and unearthly, he was overwhelmed with a sudden sense of awe. "I stood there transported with delight," he later wrote. "Whenever I remember it, my heart trembles, and it seems their voices are still in my ears." This sense of awe can be elicited by something vast or strange, endless landscapes, the sea or the desert, monuments from the distant past, the pyramids of Egypt, the unfamiliar customs of people in a foreign land. It can also be sparked by things in everyday life, for instance, focusing on the dizzying variety of animal and plant life around us that took millions of years to evolve into its present form. The philosopher Immanuel Kant, who wrote about the sublime, felt it in holding a swallow in his hands and gazing into its eye, feeling a strange connection between the two of them. It can be created by particular exercises in thinking. Imagine, for example, that you had always been blind and were suddenly granted sight. Everything you saw around you would seem strange and new, the freakish form of trees, the garishness of the color green. Or try imagining the earth in its actual smallness, a speck in vast space. The sublime on this level is merely a way of looking at things in their actual strangeness. This frees you from the prison of language and routine, this artificial world we live in. Experiencing this awe on any scale is like a sudden blast of reality, therapeutic and inspiring. The sense of the oceanic, the connection to all life. In not confronting our mortality, we tend to entertain certain illusions about death. We believe that some deaths are more important or meaningful than others, that of a celebrity or prominent politician, for instance. We feel that some deaths are more tragic, coming too early or from some accident. The truth, however, is that death makes no such discriminations. It is the ultimate equalizer. It strikes rich and poor alike. For everyone, it seems to come too early and can be experienced as tragic. Absorbing this reality should have a positive effect upon us all. We share the same fate with everyone. We all deserve the same degree of compassion. It is what ultimately links all of us together, and when we look at the people around us, we should see their mortality as well. This can be extended further and further into the sublime. Death is what links us to all living creatures as well. One organism must die so another can live. It is an endless process that we are a part of. This is what is known as an oceanic feeling, the sensation that we are not separated from the outside world, but that we are part of life in all its forms. Feeling this at moments inspires an ecstatic reaction, the very opposite of a morbid reflection on death. Reversal of perspective. In our normal perspective, we see death as something diametrically opposed to life, a separate event that ends our days. As such, it is a thought that we must dread, avoid, and repress. But this is false, an idea that is actually born out of our fear. Life and death are inextricably intertwined, not separate. The one cannot exist without the other. From the moment we are born, we carry our death within our... The 50th Law, by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. Forward. I first met 50 Cent in the winter of 2006. He had been a fan of my book, The 48 Laws of Power, and he was interested in collaborating on a book project. In the meeting, we talked about war, terrorism, the music business. What struck me most was that we had a remarkably similar way of looking at the world, one that transcended the great differences in our backgrounds. For instance, in discussing the power games he was experiencing at that time in the music business, we both looked past people's benign explanations for their behavior and tried to figure out what they were really up to. He developed this way of thinking on the dangerous streets of Southside Queens, where it was a necessary life skill. I came to it by reading a lot of history and observing the crafty maneuvers of various people in Hollywood, where I worked for many years. The perspective, however, is the same. We left the meeting that day with an open-ended idea about a future project. As I pondered the possible theme of this book over the following months, I became increasingly intrigued by the idea of bringing our two worlds together. What excites me about America is its social mobility, people continually rising from the bottom to the top and altering the culture in the process. On another level, however, we remain a nation that lives in social ghettos. Celebrities generally congregate around other celebrities. Academics and intellectuals are cloistered in their worlds. People like to associate with those of their kind. If we leave these narrow worlds, it is usually as an observer or tourist of another way of life. What seemed an interesting possibility here was to ignore our surface differences as much as possible and collaborate on the level of ideas, illuminating some truths about human nature that go beyond class or ethnicity. With an open mind and the idea of figuring out what this book could be, I hung out with 50 throughout much of 2007. I was given almost complete access to his world. I followed him on numerous high-powered business meetings, sitting quietly in a corner and observing him in action. One day, I witnessed a raucous fistfight in his office between two of his employees, with 50 having to personally break it up. I observed a fake crisis that he manufactured for the press for publicity purposes. I followed him as he mingled with other stars, friends from the hood, European royalty, and political figures. I visited his childhood home in Southside Queens, hung out with his friends from his hustling days, and got a sense of what it could be like to grow up in that world. And the more I witnessed him in action on all these fronts, the more it struck me that 50 was a walking, living example of the historical figures I had written about in my 3 books. He is a master player at power, a kind of hip-hop Napoleon Bonaparte. While writing about the various power players in history, I developed the theory that the source of their success could almost always be traced to one single skill or unique quality that separated them from others. For Napoleon, it was his remarkable ability to absorb a massive amount of detail and organize it in his mind. This allowed him to almost always know more than his rival generals about what was going on. After observing 50 and talking to him about his past, I decided that the source of his power is his utter fearlessness. This quality does not manifest itself in yelling or obvious intimidation tactics. Anytime 50 acts that way in public, it is pure theater. Behind the scenes, he is cool and calculating. His lack of fear is displayed in his attitude and his actions. He has seen and lived through too many dangerous encounters on the streets to be remotely fazed by anything in the corporate world. If a deal is not to his liking, he will walk away and not care. If he needs to play a little rough and dirty with an adversary, he goes at it without a second thought. He feels supreme confidence in himself. Living in a world where most people are generally timid and conservative, he always has the advantage of being willing to do more, to take risks, and to be unconventional. Coming from an environment in which he never expected to live past the age of 25, he feels like he has nothing to lose, and this brings him tremendous power. The more I thought of this unique strength of his, the more it seemed inspiring and instructive. I could see myself benefiting from his example and overcoming my own fears. I decided that fearlessness in all its varieties would be the subject of the book. The process for writing the 50th Law was simple. In observing and talking to 50, I noticed certain patterns of behavior and themes that would eventually turn into the 10 chapters of this book. Once I determined these themes, I discussed them with him, and together we shaped them further. We talked about overcoming the fear of death, the ability to embrace chaos and change, the mental alchemy you can effect by thinking of any adversity as an opportunity for power. We related these ideas to our own experiences and to the world at large. I then expanded on these discussions with my own research, combining the example of 50 with stories of other people throughout history who have displayed the same fearless quality. In the end, this is a book about a particular philosophy of life that can be summed up as follows. Your fears are a kind of prison that confines you within a limited range of action. The less you fear, the more power you will have and the more fully you will live. It is our hope that the 50th Law will inspire you to discover this power for yourself. Introduction. So over you is the greatest enemy a man can have, and that is fear. I know some of you are afraid to listen to the truth. You have been raised on fear and lies. But I am going to preach to you the truth until you are free of that fear. Malcolm X. The fearful attitude. In the beginning, fear was a basic, simple emotion for the human animal. We confronted something overwhelming, the imminent threat of death in the form of wars, plagues, and natural disasters, and we felt fear. As for any animal, this emotion had a protective function. It allowed us to take notice of a danger and retreat in time. For us humans, it served an additional positive purpose. We could remember the source of the threat and protect ourselves better the next time. Civilization depended on this ability to foresee and forestall dangers from the environment. Out of fear, we also developed religion and various belief systems to comfort us. Fear is the oldest and strongest emotion known to man, something deeply inscribed in our nervous system and subconscious. Over time, however, something strange began to happen. The actual terrors that we faced began to lessen in intensity as we gained increasing control over our environment. But instead of our fears lessening as well, they began to multiply in number. We started to worry about our status in society, whether people liked us or how we fit into the group. We became anxious for our livelihoods, the future of our families and children, our personal health, and the aging process. Instead of a simple, intense fear of something powerful and real, we developed a kind of generalized anxiety. It was as if the thousands of years of feeling fear in the face of nature could not go away. We had to find something at which to direct our anxiety, no matter how small or improbable. In the evolution of fear, a decisive moment occurred in the 19th century when people in advertising and journalism discovered that if they framed their stories and appeals with fear, they could capture our attention. It is an emotion we find hard to resist or control, and so they constantly shifted our focus to new possible sources of anxiety. The latest health scare, the new crime wave, a social faux pas we might be committing, and endless hazards in the environment of which we were not aware. With the increasing sophistication of the media and the visceral quality of the imagery, they have been able to give us the feeling that we are fragile creatures in an environment full of danger, even though we live in a world infinitely safer and more predictable than anything our ancestors knew. With their help, our anxieties have only increased. Fear is not designed for such a purpose. Its function is to stimulate powerful physical responses, allowing an animal to retreat in time. After the event, it is supposed to go away. An animal that cannot not let go of its fears once the threat is gone will find it hard to eat and sleep. We are the animal that cannot get rid of its fears, and when so many of them lay inside of us, these fears tend to color how we view the world. We shift from feeling fear because of some threat to having a fearful attitude towards life itself. We come to see almost every event in terms of risk. We exaggerate the dangers and our vulnerability. We instantly focus on the adversity that is always possible. We are generally unaware of this phenomenon because we accept it as normal. In times of prosperity, we have the luxury of fretting over things. But in times of trouble, this fearful attitude becomes particularly pernicious. Such moments are when we need to solve problems, deal with reality, and move forward. But fear is a call to retreat and retrench. This is precisely what Franklin Delano Roosevelt confronted when he took office in 1933. The Great Depression that had begun with the stock market crash of 1929 was now at its worst. But what struck Roosevelt was not the actual economic factors but the mood of the public. It seemed to him that people were not only more fearful than necessary, but that their fears were making it harder to surmount adversity. In his inaugural address to the country, he said that he would not ignore such obvious realities as the collapse of the economy and that he would not preach a naive optimism. But he implored his listeners to remember that the country had faced worse things in its past, periods such as the Civil War. What had brought us out of such moments was our pioneer spirit, our determination and resolve. This is what it means to be an American. Fear creates its own self-fulfilling dynamic. As people give in to it, they lose energy and momentum. Their lack of confidence translates into inaction that lowers confidence levels even further, on and on. So, first of all, he told the audience, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. What Roosevelt sketched out in his speech is the knife's edge that separates failure from success in life. That edge is your attitude, which has the power to help shape your reality. If you view everything through the lens of fear, then you tend to stay in retreat mode. You can just as easily see a crisis or problem as a challenge, an opportunity to prove your mettle, the chance to strengthen and toughen yourself, or a call to collective action. By seeing it as a challenge, you will have converted this negative into a positive purely by a mental process that will result in positive action as well. And in fact, through his inspiring leadership, FDR was able to help the country shift its mindset and confront the Depression with a more enterprising spirit. Today, we seem to face new problems and crises that test our national mettle. But just as FDR made the comparison to even worse times in the past, we can say that what we are facing is not as bad as the perils of the 1930s and the subsequent war years. In fact, the reality of 21st century America is something more like the following. Our physical environment is safer and more secure than any other moment in our history. We live in the most prosperous country in the world. In the past, only white males could play the power game. Now millions upon millions of minorities and women have been given entrance to the arena, forever altering the dynamic, making us the most socially advanced country in that regard. Advances in technology have opened up all kinds of new opportunities. Old business models are dissolving, leaving the field wide open for innovation.